Hey everybody, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name is Paul.
This is Ryan.
And today we are talking about the Siege of Castle Rend.
Yeah, so the Siege of Castle Rend is an adventure for 5th edition D&D. And it's found in the Strongholds and Followers supplement book by, I guess what they call themselves, Matt Colville's company. I can't remember the name of what they've called themselves these days. So it was written by James Haeck from an outline provided to him by Matt Colville.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for 5 5th level PCs, I think is the power level.
Yep,
that's
right.
And the briefest of synopses. I don't know, what's the plural of synopsis? Synopsises?
Snipsises.
I don't know. Synopsi? It basically, the PCs are around when a town gets raided by orcs. Up on this, they have the opportunity to rescue a hostage, which turns out to be the heir to the local barony. I think it's the Baron of Bedegar is the way they set it up. And become the owners of a castle.
Yep.
Which I guess the idea behind this is to show off some of the Strongholds and Followers rules, which makes sense if you're having an adventure in a supplement. So, general impressions. What did you think?
I don't think it's bad. I think with the information about Strongholds and Followers is good in it. I think that the adventure plays service to the book that it's supporting. So it seems to be written to get the PC's Strongholds and Followers. I don't know if I would run this adventure. I got the kind of general impression that it was written by maybe people that played it, or written based on how his players reacted to certain things. So it felt a little biased towards like his groups maybe. But I mean, overall, I think like the theme of it's interesting and the narrative's okay. Rescuing, the Baron of something and having those ties is neat in an adventure campaign and a good way to start, I guess. I mean, you wouldn't be starting here, I suppose, but yeah, it's all right. I wouldn't run it, I don't think.
I wanted to like it more than I did is probably the way I'd best describe it. I think it's fine, with the, damning it with faint praise. I think it's okay. And I'm not even biased against Colville or anything like that. I actually backed this when the initial Kickstarter campaign came out. So I forgot to mention where you could pick this up. I think they sell it through their websites. You can get the PDF through there and hard copies still. I think there's still some fulfillments for the hard copies going out. So you'd have to look into that. I can't remember specifically. I did not back a hard copy. The duties and shipping would have killed me, and I already have enough hard copy D&D books on my bookshelf that I never use already. So I didn't really see the point.
Fair.
And I don't want to get into the actual supplement itself. It's fine. Not much that I would necessarily use for my style of game, but I think there's some interesting things in there. But I agree with what you were saying, is that it feels very setting dependent. I mean, we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of it, but I found in reading it that a lot of the stuff only really has payoff if you know the background. Like, the players need to be a little bit more involved in the politics of the area and have good knowledge of what's going on. So I made a little note here that you kind of need to plan on using this at 5th level, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think all of the lead up gameplay, like your introductory adventuring, really should be in the area and give the players the opportunity to sort of get a feel for the world, because it feels very setting specific, and to try to just port this into your own campaign world, while totally doable, you need to make sure that it hits the same beats.
Yeah, and I think maybe they recognized that at the beginning too, because they did outline like the notable PCs in the area and their motivations in town as well. So I think maybe they identified that as well, that like if you just jumped into this, it wouldn't make much sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, and I do agree with that. I really did like, I made a note in my little scribbles here as well, that of how appreciative I was of the fact that, yeah, every major NPC has a little paragraph about who they are and motivations. And from a DM standpoint, awesome. Like, you know who the players are and what have you. But then it puts the responsibility to the DM to dump this information into your players' brains.
Yep.
So how do you do this? If you're just running this as a standalone, you literally should just give your players a sheet of like, here is the history of the area, so all of this makes sense. You have the Greek chorus come out and explain this, what's going on, for it to really fit. Also, just as in the general comments before we get going here is, I found it a bit irritating that the point of this adventure was to illustrate some of the rules that were being presented in the supplement. And it doesn't work that way because of the timeline and time frame they've built into the adventure. It specifically says you should let them do it using different rules so they can actually take advantage of it, because as written, you can't use the rules that we've just given you. And to me, that made me angry. Mm-hmm. The whole point of the adventure is to show off the rules, build the adventure so you can actually use the rules. So that kind of irritated me a fair bit. Let's dive in, unless you have comments.
I don't. Okay. No.
So hooks.
Well, you're in town to begin with, so there's kind of a couple, I guess, loose-ish hooks. So if you were invested, the NPC Sir Peloton is coming back to town with a magic item. He ends up posting a wanted poster in the inn, the Reluctant Pig. For whatever reason, people don't like him. There's an uproar. Anyway,
he's a dick.
Yeah. And the poster is just a reward for white tusk orc heads. I found that this probably would not be terribly motivating to go investigate a bunch of stuff. But then on the back of that, there's a raid on town. One of the NPCs gets kidnapped. So I guess in combination of all those things, if you had an investment in the NPC, Pinna, the hedge mage, that you would want to rescue her, or perhaps they're like, why?
It's a call to adventure.
Yeah, right? It's like someone's
people
stolen.
Are there to play D&D. You've given them a plot. They should follow it. I did think it was kind of funny that if your players were super gung-ho, maybe they would just leave immediately and sort of go look for orcs to kill. Mm-hmm. Like, sweet, 5 gold pieces and orc tusk, or whatever the reward is. I can't remember. In a game where money doesn't actually really mean anything. Though I think, wasn't there a title associated with it? So if you bring them the head of the leader. Yeah. I think on the wanted poster. The deed. Well, no, I think on the wanted poster there was the promise of a knightship or something. There was some sort of title associated if you brought the Baron, the Regent of Bedegar, the head of the leader of the White Tusk Orcs.
I remember listening to Colville's talk about this adventure on YouTube, his channel, whatever it is.
Just Matt Colville.
And I think this was a starting adventure for a group of his players, that they just jumped into this point. And the idea was that they get titles, they get magic items, they get cool things. And I think that the beginning in these hooks, sort of the way that I read it would be reading it's playable to people that don't really know how to progress, sort of, because if you don't follow up on any of these things, like a villager will come help you track them down, or an orc envoy comes back to town to negotiate for the prisoner, so it's if they're just sitting around not really knowing what to do, there's all these safety nets for them to be well, you should go and do this.
Well, I don't have a problem with that. I actually think that's good adventure design, because it just illustrates that things are happening if the players don't take the initiative, right? Like, you can't just sit around and do nothing indefinitely and expect everybody to wait until you get around to it. I believe there's also a sort of a ticking clock where villagers will eventually organize their own rescue party and then all die effectively. Which, again, I think this is a good thing. If you have a world, it should feel believable, that it's not just waiting on the players. Now, to sort of backtrack a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about those NPCs you mentioned previously, the arrival of Sir Peloton and Pinna the Mage. So, and Lord Saxton. I had some comments about the town and the NPCs because it bothered me. Sorry, just looking at my notes here. So, in terms of the backgrounds, one thing that kind of bugged me was that this Lord Saxton was the usurper of Bedigar. I guess, to put this into context, the Baron and his family of the Barony of Bedigar all were killed. They were ambushed by orcs. They all died. And now there's been, there's a price on orcs, I guess, ostensibly as a bounty for revenge on blah, 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 on the orcs for killing the Baron and his family. And what you find, well, I guess the players could find this out, is that the current Baron of Bedigar, the usurper, Lord Saxton, actually hired the orcs to kill the family and take over as regent of the barony. And this bugged me enough that I actually looked up how the medieval regency rules actually work to see how you become a regent of an area.
Yeah.
And I'm reasonably sure you can't just decide you're the regent. Reasonably positive that's the case. I mean, there's a bunch of different historical precedences of how the regency occurred.
So this is historically inaccurate.
Well,
if you care.
It just bugged me when it's really easy to make it fit logically.
Yeah.
All you need to do is make Lord Saxton a Bedigar.
Mm-hmm.
You just make him a brother.
Right.
Right? You just go full on Hamlet or Lion King, depending on how what references you prefer. Right? You just make him a blood relative. Oh, his older brother and his brother's family all died.
Or
I
the
guess
uncle
I
or
will
something.
have to. You just make him the uncle, right?
Yeah.
And that way, it fits logically. And as we'll see, the politics of things get a little muddied a little bit when you get blood relations. But just steal the plot of the Lion King. It fits just as well.
Yeah.
And then you won't have people like me that are like, how does this work? Right? I'm not sure that works legally.
For half a second, I was like, what is the Lion King? I couldn't think of it. Yeah.
Scar kills Mufasa.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. Scares off Simba. Yeah.
It's a usurper, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's a blood relative, then it makes more sense. I mean, then again, it depends on how you do your medieval ruling class inheritance in your fantasy world. Also, another thing that bugged me was Pinna the Mage.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, the Pinna is your ear, so her name means ear. It's the outer part of your ear, and that just bugged me based off of the fact that that's what I do for a living. Teach that stuff for a living. The other thing is that she's 17.
Uh-huh.
Okay? She's an apprentice wizard.
Yeah.
Right? She's also a level 3 wizard.
Uh-huh.
So when do you not be an apprentice anymore?
Good question.
So
or who's she apprenticed to?
There's a traveling mage guy, right? But that's the type of thing that makes me go like, no.
Like level 3 is the point when you're feeling good when you're a wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just get level 3 is the sweet spot for most classes when you start to get your cool abilities. But no, you can be an apprentice and be level 3 and 17.
She's just a lifelong learner.
No, see, again, this is something else that sent me to like the rule book to see if there was age charts. And I can't remember what I found because I know in older editions there was age charts. If you were a barbarian, your age range was, if you're human or elf or whatever, because different disciplines, different professions or classes require more training, right? Apparently, wizards aren't the case.
Well,
so it bugged me.
young ear is powerful mage.
No, I did. I don't want to get into it, but it really irritated me. And just in terms of what town is, it's fine. In terms of it's functional, it's not what I've come to be used to all of the first edition adventures that we've read with their sweet town descriptions.
Yeah, very spoiled in those old adventures.
Yeah. But it has everything you need. There's enough general NPCs, and town council members are all fleshed out.
Yeah.
And in particular, I did like the reluctant pig as a name for an inn. I liked it enough that I made a special note of it.
Yeah, it's a good inn name. Yeah. The only thing that sort of bothered me about like the town in general is that it really seemed to push for them to get the death ward blessing from the priest. I can't remember. There's a couple of conditions which they could get blessed by the priest, but it was effectively just getting a death ward put on you, which seems like a handicap in the adventure. I think I made note of it another time later on, perhaps, but it's just sort of like you can do this and then get that, and I was just like, why? Like,
well, anyway. I mean, sometimes you want to have side quests, I guess, and this is not a very side quest full adventure. So I mean, as you said, Sir Peloton showing up is the first reactive thing that the players have access to put up the poster. I mean, and basically the whole point of this encounter is to get your players to hate Sir Peloton.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be a super dick, effectively.
It's like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, since we're on Disney references. Nobody likes him. He's rambunctious. He's annoying.
He's
mean.
He's evil. So he is one of Lord Saxton's knights. He's the Knight Stars. Again, this is all Covillian setting stuff, which is where, again, a lot of sort of just sort of setting dissonance was bugging. Like, it was just bugging me because I'm just like, this doesn't fit in a setting neutral type of situation, right? And again, he basically is trying to get the players to fight him, so he'll goad them as much as possible. He's got some other flunkies with him. It's not just him by himself. But it seems to me that the whole point is to get your players to get into a fight with him, and then lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's broken as a like in terms of broken good. He's not even you couldn't make him as your own character. Mm-hmm. He's a hodgepodge of abilities from a million different classes. He's basically part knight, part wizard, part warlock, and busted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, this was something that sent me to the player's handbook to be like, you can't actually do this, can you? And I'm like, no. He has an ability to use his warlock hellish rebuke power, but it does max damage, and he can use it twice. Or is it no? He can use so his hellish rebuke does max damage by default because the game says so.
Yeah,
and he can use Eldritch Blast at 11th level and attack twice per round. I'm like, he's just going to obliterate your players.
Yeah.
And it bugged me. Like, I'm okay with the idea of just giving your monsters, your bosses, abilities that a player can't have.
Yeah.
You know, it's a sort of 4th edition mindset where you're building cool things. But this particular baddie, can cast black tentacles more than like a 10th level wizard.
Uh-huh.
Right? I was like, that doesn't seem fair, especially when it's supposed to be a person with abilities.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making a monster or a crazy dragon sorcerer, go nuts. But this is one of those situations where if I was a player, I'd be like, how can he do this? How is he casting this again? And it's one of those situations where the DM's just like, I want him to be super awesome, so I made him super awesome. And
They like put in a reason for you not to win. Like, there's not even like a chance.
No, you're not supposed to win now because you're supposed to win later. When you get to fight him again.
It's kind of like video gamey. You fight the big bad early and you lose. And it's like, how am I ever supposed to beat this? And then you go through the adventure and you get stronger. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, it's like, You could just like build in a narrative thing that you can't win, gets broken up by the militia.
Well, he's the law. Like, he literally is the law. If they get into a fight, he should just arrest them because he can. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, and then you can hand wave whatever reason for him getting released.
Well, yeah, he could be like still powerful or a higher level, and you could have the fight, and then at some point, if he gets to a losing point, and he just like exclaims like arrest them, and people just grab your PCs and you get overwhelmed. Makes more sense having him that powerful, I guess. I mean, I agree with giving NPCs like things that players can't have too, but yeah, it's a bit much.
It just bothered me from a standpoint. And again, I think this is one of those situations that you could probably avoid if you had built him as a villain earlier in your campaign, right? If the players have been interacting with him multiple times enough to like not like him, right? Then you don't need to have this situation. So I feel that this is more about like, let's create an instant adversary. Yeah. More so than like actual character development or anything like that. So
I agree.
It irritated me a little bit.
So once you move beyond this first stuff, I mean, really the next section is the Forest of Rend on your...
Oh, I guess you want to talk about the raid? Like the actual details of it? Did you have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add. White Tusk orcs come to the village and they end up abducting Pinna. You find out because of the commotion, and her house gets set on fire. If your PCs react quick enough, you can make it to her place. She'll be gone, but you can scavenge some potions, I think, out of her alchemy lab before the whole thing burns down, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's sort of just like she gets stolen, you've got another hostage you can save later on. And I guess it's an extra motivation to maybe go deal with these orcs, aside from the poster posted by the Dick.
Part of my notes is this part is dumb.
Yeah.
I'd like to elaborate on that. Again, this was a situation that like forced me to look up the rules for potion crafting as to whether or not this should be a thing, because I'm that pedantic sometimes. But this whole part bothered me so much. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the logic for the orcs to kidnap somebody from the town is this is how they think you're supposed to start negotiations with somebody. Because this is how the humans started negotiations with the White Tusks. Mm-hmm. Lord Saxton and flunkies kidnapped an orc and then started negotiations that way. So this is the logic behind the orc raid. Why are they going after the wizard? Why would they know that there's a wizard there at all? Is this just random luck? Maybe. Mm-hmm. I'll give it that. Okay? Now, if that's the case, why did they kill a guard to go kidnap the wizard? Why didn't they just kidnap the guard? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't read too much into it, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess they knew-ish, whatever.
That's the type of thing that bothers me the most about adventures in general, is when the internal logic doesn't make sense. Yeah. Right? I'm fine when there's all types of crazy in it. Yeah. As long as it makes sense internally. Yeah. But when the motivations, stated motivation of the creatures in the adventure don't actually match their actions, that just bugs me because it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Right? If you want the wizard to be kidnapped, fine. Have her kidnapped when she's collecting herbs to make potions, and then you have somebody run into town and be like, Pinna was kidnapped. I saw some orcs grab her, right? Yeah. Like, totally fine. Like the issue, the way it reads is that the guy writing the adventure wanted the wizard to be kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
So wizard's going to get kidnapped. Oh, but doesn't the town have a militia? Yep. But they just killed the militia guard so they could kidnap the wizard.
See, I think that lends itself back to what I said in the beginning. I think this was written based on how it was played the first time, right? Outlined by Colville, the wizard was kidnapped in his adventure. Therefore, the wizard is kidnapped in the written adventure for whatever reason, right?
And entirely possible.
You know, like if you were writing it, you could be sitting there being like, this doesn't make sense. And then maybe it's like, well, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Write it how it happened so people can play exactly how I played it.
Sure. I'll give it that.
You know, like that's how I feel like this was very written, like how it was played.
Yeah.
Like he either sat down and listened to their podcast that they had at the beginning when they ran this, because I think he had one, or like sat down with a play-by-play of what went down.
I think, I don't think it's that noodly from listening to his YouTube channel. I think this has been run multiple times, right? Like I think this basically is his own little linker adventure that ties into his, Reptile God, or what's the other one he does? Village of Hamlet, into The Night Below, and then he's got this sort of filler political adventure thing that sort of sticks in there. So I think it's been run multiple times. I'm sure he has notes regarding this. I don't know if like an exploding alchemy shop happens every single time, but you might be right. I might be defending him for no reason, and then it is always just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, it just
by design.
Yeah. And I don't know who James Haeck is, right? Like, is he another writer at Turtle Rock Studios or wherever they worked, or a friend or someone that ran the game that said, hey, I could do that. That is also a writer. You know, I don't know their relationships, but anyway, so it
could be it's a Google check away.
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to look up what else that person. I think he's a published.
So if you manage to make it through the village of Gravesford without being utterly disgusted with the writing as a player, you make it to the Forest Rend, which I think was meant to just be very brief. It's just sort of in between going from town to the castle. There are a couple random encounters that you can run into. There's a centipedes, some other random encounters, a shambling mound that's eaten some orcs, and you have the chance to maybe capture an orc. To interrogate along the way, so you can pick up some information on the way to the castle.
Well, it's just a series of skill checks.
Yeah.
Where things can happen if you don't make the skill checks effectively.
Yeah. You can find out that there is another prisoner at the castle in between this time if you interrogate an orc,
this is where you can pick up that halfling scout as well. If you don't have a rangery type or druidy type in your party, one shows up to help you out.
He is the guide.
Now one thing, this is just sort of a transitionary, I don't even call it a chapter, subchapter.
Yeah.
But in reading this, I was trying to think of how does this play out if your players just chase right off the bat, right? And I've had adventures where people have decided to chase through the night and what have you. And I don't know how I would do it, because you really can't use any of it.
Yeah.
Right? In the kidnapping, there is a group of orcs that stay behind to slow down any pursuers. So you're going to be behind, but you're going to be,
not that far behind.
A minute behind?
Yeah.
Right? Like how?
I mean, I guess you could do
what's a 5th edition combat round? So is it still 6 seconds?
Whatever normal is.
Right, so even if it goes 10 rounds, you're 6 minutes behind the people if you go right after them. So suddenly it becomes a chase scene through the forest.
Well, I guess it's not really prepared to do that. And like, to be prepared to do that, you'd have to know how many orcs were raiding the town to start, right? You couldn't just have like infinite orcs interrupting them so they don't get there.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, I think that'd be a cool chase scene where you could have like an escalating difficulty of picking up the trail
Yep.
after an encounter, right? Like if one orc stops to fight you, and there's 5 orcs in total,
Yep.
right? Then you're a minute behind. You're -2 to your roll. That first time you pick up the trail again, you run into another combat. Like depending on how long combat takes, you could add an escalating DC to being able to pick up the trail again.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we did that, right? I ran an adventure that you played in where there was chasing goblins or hobgoblins, I can't remember, goblins through the night, and there was things to slow you down, and there was the issue when it comes to this type of thing is to remember exhaustion. A roll, because if it's at night, then you haven't rested, so you're getting into that aspect of it. And there's actually really fun ways that you can do chases, and I've seen some products that they're basically chase cards. So if you're chasing through a forest, you like draw a card, and it's basically you've lost the trail, make a roll, and if you succeed the roll, then you pick it up right away. If you fail the roll, well, then you lose time.
That's cool.
And I think that's a really good way to do chases. I had a chase scene in an adventure, a Pathfinder adventure that I'm actually still chugging away at. But at one point, they found a magic item, and they didn't know what it did yet. But the person who held it became really paranoid and didn't want to give it up. So I let the player know that you don't want them to take this away from you. And the player's just like, I run. And then it literally, like, it's not in the adventure whatsoever, but we scripted out a whole chase scene through a city where this person's just like, no, you can't have it. You can't have it. And like the rest of the party is chasing their buddy who's under the compulsion from the magic. And that worked really, really well. So you can definitely do that, but as written, the adventure isn't set up that way. And the expectation is that the players don't get there until a couple days later, almost. Like there's this implied lag period between when Pinna gets captured and when the players show up to rescue her. And we'll get to that reason shortly. Why would they? You know what I mean? Like, that's not usually the response that I've seen with my players, is for them to be like, oh yeah, we'll just wait for light. I hear orcs eat people, but I'm sure she'll be fine, right? So I didn't like that wasn't even sort of a proposed option. Right. So again, this is one of those things that, like, if you're making it your own adventure, you have to be prepared for all of this type of stuff. But if I'm buying an adventure, I kind of expect a lot, if not all of that, to be provided for me, because that's the whole reason to do it, right? Because if your players end up chasing the orcs and you play it out and they catch them and they rescue Pinna, all right.
Mission accomplished. Yeah, we get some rewards for having some orc scalps, and we saved Pinna.
We saved the day.
Yeah.
And then, what happens next, right? So then you're suddenly modifying the adventure substantially.
And they already have a hostage.
Yeah.
But it defeats the logic of needing a hostage to open negotiations.
They're orcs, I guess? They don't understand how this civilization thing works. No, it's I don't know.
Oh, well, I mean,
I could go down this rabbit hole of why I didn't like this initiating activity at all. There's a million better ways of doing this, but I think the whole point is to create a situation where the players are by default going to be hostile against the orcs. Right? Because if they just show up waving a flag to talk, well, that eliminates like everything. Like almost all of the combat in this adventure goes away if the orcs actually showed up to negotiate properly.
Which they're more than willing to do, as you find out when you get to the castle.
After you've murdered half of plus of the tribe?
And then they'll be your friends later.
And then, then you're going to negotiate. Hey, we killed everybody. We killed your family, but now we'll talk about it. Like, it just... Again, this is a situation where the internal logic bugged me. There's just better ways that it could play out. And this is a situation where, for sure, I think that's just the way the players played it out every time he's run it. So
I agree.
So Castle Rend, that's where you eventually are going to end up. As written, the players wait till dawn, and then they
At dawn we ride.
spend a day in the forest, and then find the ruins of a castle. And I am generally a fan of infiltration style adventures. Right, this is a try to sneak in and rescue the hostage type of dealie, and I think that's a good way of structuring an adventure. I don't know that this is the best example that I've ever seen of it. What else do we got here? Oh, again, this is a situation where it only really makes sense if you're running it in Matt Colville's setting, right? Because this is the formal castle of the Blue Dragonflight, who were the dragon. What are they called? I can't remember the class. What's the race called? They're
Dragonborn.
Dragonborn. There we go. So the Dragonborn knights of Good King Omen, who existed in the past at some point.
Yeah.
So this, was the castle of good Dragonborn knights, and has fallen into ruins, and then the orcs have shown up. So again, make sure you change that to fit your setting as appropriate, or it doesn't make sense. From just a dungeon design standpoint, I think there's some interesting encounters in here. I think there's a good mix of orcs and undead, and there's good logic behind why the undead are there. Right, the dungeon ecology, I guess, makes sense. Yep. Right, the undead are basically remnants of these Dragonborn knights that used to be there. They're not inherently evil undead. They're more protective undead.
Right.
They're preventing the despoiling of
desecration of their tombs, basically. Yeah, I think when a dungeon makes sense, it makes me feel good, that things are there for a reason, that they're not just cohabitating in peace, that there's not giant spiders and undead and orcs and goblins and
gelatinous cubes.
And ichors and goos, and they all just kind of have lived in this place peacefully until the point where you show up and then you kill them all in sequence. So I am a fan when things are written to make sense.
It's a perfectly fine dungeon.
Thank you. I also once you get to the dungeon level of the castle, I'm always a big fan of environmental effects. There's a constitution saving throw you need to make for the stench of an area, which is, you get poisoned for just smelling this. And I think environmental things are always cool, and use them more often because it adds life to the place that you're in. Another also flavor thing that I enjoyed is that you can find the war speakers, which would be the caster of the orc tribe, but you can find his stone tablets, which are just spell scrolls for orcs written in stone in Orcish, and you can't use them unless you can read and write Orcish, which I thought was you don't really see too much of that. It's you just find a spell scroll that happens to be in your language and you can use them. So I thought that was neat as well.
That was a good thematic touch.
Yeah, which makes me happy in dungeons.
Yeah, and for an infiltration style adventure, there's multiple ways that you could theoretically get in, but from reading it realistically, you're supposed to find the secret entrance, quote unquote, the tunnel entrance to get in. Otherwise, you're kind of in trouble. Basically, I'm not actually sure how this is supposed to play out.
Two ways, right? You can end up in the big negotiation with Dorikar.
Well, that's going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
Right? Again, most of this doesn't play out if the PCs just walk up to the front gate and say, hey, we want our wizard back. Right? The least confrontational approach is the most successful. Are the players going to be inclined to do that?
I don't know.
right? Because they've already fought orcs, right? If they even chased a little bit after the kidnappers, they would have fought a bunch of orcs.
Yeah.
And maybe, almost died.
Yeah.
And you walk up to, like, negotiate. Because otherwise, you just kill people until you're loud enough for Bonebreaker Dorkor, which is the
big bad,
the cool named orc leader. You basically kill enough people, cause enough ruckus for them to show up.
Yeah.
And then she starts to negotiate. And Pinna, who has gone all Stockholm Syndrome, like, immediately.
Yeah. It's been, like, making potions for them. And
so they're best friends. It's only been a couple of hours, but no, the good orcs, right?
It just kind of accelerates quickly, it just sort of happens for the sake of happening, so you can get your stronghold.
Yeah.
And then have the siege at the end, right? Like, it all happens very quickly. If you befriend the orcs, they give you their war horn. You can call upon them later in the next section, which is the Siege of Castle Rend.
Well,
it all just kind of like it goes. I think it plays okay as an adventure up to this point, right? There's some motivation for the PCs, and all of a sudden you find out that this young nobility is there, and that so and so is coming back to kill him so he can maintain his regency, and then
the quote unquote negotiation. The exposition happens.
Yeah.
Right. So Bonebreaker Dorkor, the players find out that they were hired to kill the Baron of Bedegar and his family. She assumed that they'd be double-crossed, so she kept the youngest son alive as a bargaining chip. Right. Again, this is still the person that killed the Baron and a bunch of other people, but they didn't kill one of them, so they're okay to be friends with. Right? So this is where you find that out, but why do the players care about the Baron of Bedegar at all? Right? If they're just a bunch of murder hobos, probably don't care. So this is, again, something you kind of should probably set up in your adventure at some point. Also, the whole point of the kidnapping is to get you to come and talk to Bonebreaker Dorkor to negotiate. She wants to let people know that this is what happened because she was double-crossed by Lord Saxton. But she won't give up the heir without a trade.
Yeah.
So she wants your player's most expensive magic item. So for the adventure to continue without the players trying to murder everybody, you need them to give up their most expensive magic item to trade for an 11-year-old or whatever. So you have to buy a child in this adventure. And I don't know if my players would be willing to. I don't know that they would care enough to negotiate at that point. Right? In most cases, I could see them just want to kill everybody. Be like, no, we're not interested, thank you. And then just come back later and kill everybody. Right? I don't know that they'd necessarily just go out in a blaze of glory. They'd be like, we need to go think about this.
Outside with our magic items.
Go rest and then come back in and then, So, and if you do just murder all of the orcs, that makes the adventure unwinnable?
I guess so, yeah.
All right, anyways, as much as I'm criticizing, let's assume that this goes well. Your players are like, sure, you can have my magical sword of awesomeness, we'll take the kid. The orcs are like, all right, great, keep the castle, we don't care, we leave.
Yeah.
In exploring the castle and dealing with the undeads in the basement, you can find some super sweet stuff. And I think as written, the idea is you find this amazing sword in the basement in one of the tombs to just give it away. Now, again, this only works if the players don't just walk up to the front door and knock on it. Because if they don't do that, then they're never going to find the sword until after the
Also
fact.
assumes that a group of 5th level PCs don't have magic items up to this point.
It's 5e, and magic items aren't necessarily...
But they may have something.
They should have something, but they might only have like one or two, right? Like it's not like they have a lot.
Yeah.
So it is a big sacrifice. It's not like an earlier edition where everybody's got a magic sword and gauntlets of ogre power and. It might just be the one thing that's awesome.
Well, you're giving it up.
Or murdering everybody. So players, assuming everything goes well, the orcs leave. At this point, if they haven't already, the players can search the castle, and they can find the treasury. Like, there's a bunch of coinage and cool magic items in there.
Yeah,
for sure. And if they rescue Edmund, I think his name is, so the young heir to the barony of Bedegar, he knights the person who seems to be in charge.
Yeah.
Which I think would be really funny if that wasn't even the person that gave up the magic item.
Yeah.
Right? Your wizard just gives up their awesome magic staff because they have to, and then he's like, hey, you in the armor, you're Sir So-and-so. Here, I give you these lands and the keep, you know?
Like the quiet guy in the back of the party, like the thief leaning up against the wall.
Well, I think it does stipulate that it is the most fighterly looking. I can't remember the way they describe it. Basically, it's if there's a fighter, or like just if there's a paladin or a fighter, they are probably going, or I guess a cleric too, could end up being knighted. But I just wrote so like, yay for that one person. Yeah. Good for them. So again, hopefully you have a party that works coherently together, that, one person's success is everybody's success. Because I'd be pretty grumpy, especially if I was the person that gave up the magic item. I'd be like, wait, what? Yeah. No.
I'm Sir So-and-so.
This is BS. I want one too. Like, it's just knighting. Knight everybody. Like,
yeah.
It's like a 12-year-old. Like, anyone's going to believe him anyways, right? So, regardless. So this brings us to a transitionary point in the adventure where we finally get to use the rules that come in this supplement. And this leads us to the Siege of Castle Rend. So the way this starts out, and it can start out in a couple of different ways, which I appreciated because they actually presented in the adventure, like, if you're in town, this is what happens. If you're not in town, this is what happens. But basically, a thief just sort of shows up and comes to talk to you and be like, yeah, you guys are screwed. Did you know that? Like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, yeah, no, you're... So a thief comes, which I can't remember what his name was, Fuzzy Toes, Waffle Hair, or whatever, some halfling name. But basically says that Sir Peloton, the knight that picked a fight with you earlier, is coming to the castle with an army to defeat the orcs, because he doesn't know that the orcs aren't there, and he doesn't care regardless. So he's gonna fight you. If you want to keep the castle, you got to defend it effectively. One thing I did point out is I really enjoyed the description of the Thieves Guild. That the guild was the clock, and that the agents are a cog of the clock. I like that. I just thought, hey, that's really clever. Well done, Colville. Or whoever did come up with that little detail. Made me smile. But this is where the supplement's stronghold rules are supposed to come in, and the whole thing falls apart because you can't use the stronghold rules to actually end stuff out, because Pelton's showing up in a couple of days, and all the rules take weeks, because you're supposed to, fix the castle. That costs thousands of gold and takes weeks to do.
Yeah.
So the adventure says, hand wave it. This one time, let them break the rules so you can actually play properly.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't it ask them how they want to classify their keep at the get-go? You can be like a fourth level keep or a first level castle or something like that, and it's just like...
It gets into the noodly bits of the rules for the supplements, and I don't want to get into the noodly bits. So there's some options there. But basically, you have a broken keep, and for anything to actually come into effect, it needs to be repaired. So you should give more time, right? Like, there needs to be time for stuff to happen.
Yeah.
And as written, it's within days. So I don't know that it should. And I don't think it does. I'm trying to remember listening to how it actually played out in Colville's actual adventure, I don't think it happened right away. I think there was a bunch of other adventuring they did between getting rescuing Edmund, and the Siege of Castle Rend.
Right, yeah.
Because I think that was the last thing that happened in their campaign before they started their new campaign.
Yeah.
So, as written, I don't think it works.
Yeah.
I think a better way to run it out is you now have to do other, like there should just be other stuff. And the Castle Rend aspect happens at the end. Right? Because it gives you the opportunity to actually fix the castle and
I mean, like, the thing is if you make the regent family, like you said in the beginning, I mean, you don't have to, like, Edmund doesn't need to be a dumb 12-year-old or however old he is, you know? He could know that his uncle killed his father and that...
Well, he knows all that,
you know, but, like, if it's family ties, then you could have motivation for him wanting to stay at the castle and rebuild it so he can, you know, summon an army to maybe try and take back his land from his uncle and take his rightful spot as heir.
Well, yeah,
right?
I think logically that's where the progression of the adventure goes from that point.
But not as written in this adventure. It's you do it and it's done. But it's like you could just as easily do that, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that totally makes sense. And then once he, you know, in your campaign, once the castle's been fixed, that, you know, maybe Saxton finds out about it and then sends people to investigate, and then they find out that there's an heir left. Well, then he wants to put the heir to, you know, you send assassins, and then suddenly you can build stuff up. So until Edmund declares himself publicly, he's, you know, doesn't exist effectively, right? Yeah. So he's vulnerable to assassination, because if he kills him, and, you know, if a heir gets killed in the forest and no one's around to hear it, you
doesn't
know,
heir die? Yeah.
Right. So that would encourage him to declare himself, and then suddenly you can bring in the mass warfare stuff and what have you. And that does bring me to a point that kind of bugs me, is because there's no reason for this to end with warfare, right? And there's no real warfare rules in this supplement. That's their next supplement. So this adventure ends with an advertisement for the next thing that they're going to be kickstarting. I think is it Warfare and something or other. I can't remember what they're calling it, which isn't out yet. So there's some sort of slapdash rules on how to run Warfare when they don't really need that, right? Because you could have just ended it with him being rescued without the negotiation aspect. Because as is, to actually fight off Sir Peloton and his army, you need soldiers. The recommended soldiers to use are the orcs. And how do you get the orcs to work for you?
Blow their horn?
That's how you call them to see. They don't fight for you yet.
I can't remember.
They want the wizard. You have to trade them Pinna for like a year. And she's going to make them magic items and potions. For a bunch of bloodthirsty orcs. The moral gray area here is ridiculous.
Right, yeah.
You know what I would do? I'd say, sure. And then I'd make sure all the orcs die in the battle.
Yeah. You're on the front lines, boys.
Yeah, you're the shock troopers. Hey, 3 of you survive. Both stab, stab, stab.
Yeah.
Like, I would not negotiate in good faith. Whatsoever, and I don't think there's any reason to negotiate in good faith with these orcs. That's assuming you didn't just kill them all, rescuing Edmund of Bedgar. So if you actually killed everybody, then you don't have any soldiers, and they're just in the adventure that is like, well, just make something up.
Yeah.
And again, if I was just going to make something up, I wouldn't use a published adventure. So it bugged me. That bugged me to no end, that an adventure that exists to show off certain rules doesn't really follow the rules at all.
I agree. Yeah.
And again, what else did I say there? Oh, and then you're supposed to eventually fight Peloton, and he's got Wizard Crony. Like, they teleport into the castle, and then you got to fight him. And reading it seems tough to me, but I'm terrible at judging difficulty. Yeah,
it's really hard to tell when you're reading. Yeah.
And it's 5th edition, so I assume it's not as hard as it appears to be.
Well, if you couldn't beat him alone and in 1-on-1 or 1-on-5, I don't see how you're going to beat him at the end of this. It's not like all of a sudden you're level 9.
Well, that's sort of like you couldn't beat him. Like at most, you maybe went up 1 level.
Maybe.
So you had no chance a level ago, but now you have a chance when he's got actual difficult cronies with him now. So I don't know. I try not to think about that too much because I won't
ever play it.
I won't ever play a point. Anyways, and then it wraps up with you successfully defending the castle and defeating Sir Peloton. And as we already mentioned, moving forward, you probably are going to be going into the politics of maybe trying to get Edmund back on the, I don't know, do barons have thrones? Like,
nice chair where he listens to townsfolk.
To get him back into power. So,
Final thoughts?
Well, just sort of reiterate what I started with. I wanted to like this more than I did. I enjoy most of what Matt Colville's produced. And I think he's a lot of good ideas. I just didn't particularly care for this particular product.
Yeah.
Mostly in that to run it properly, I'd have to put a lot of work into it because it is so heavily tied to the lore of his setting. Like, in particular, that's what's struck me. It's like, okay, well, how would I make that work in my setting? How would I make that work? It's not neutral enough to just plug and play.
Yeah.
As sort of a outline for how to get into like the politics of something, I really do think having the kidnapped heir and all of that, and having them being an ally and that aspect of it is really interesting as a concept and totally stealable. But yeah,
would you run it or would you not run it?
No, I don't like it enough to run it. I think there's enough other cool adventures. Like if I just cared about my players getting a keep, I just run the beginning of Red Hand of Doom.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lovely keep there.
Yeah.
That you find the D2 that you can get. Like there's enough other options out there. I like the plot. Like I'd steal the plot elements more than I'd use the adventure itself. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, for me, I think it fails like lots of the other adventures that we've done. You could plop it into any campaign setting and run. You can't do that with this. It really felt to me like it was written by people that had run it, not as sort of an adventure. There's suggestions that seemed like that's how it was played before, and like maybe your players could do this in this situation. So it felt like it was run from experience or suggestions given from experience of people that have run it. I wouldn't run it, I don't think. Agree, the plot's good. The theme of the dungeon's good. Yeah, but wouldn't run. It was okay. Yeah.
From just like a dungeon layout and design, I think is totally fine. And the thing I thought would be kind of hilarious is that your players could just sell Edmund back to Lord Saxton, make a killing, and be done with it.
You could, yeah.
Right.
We're out of here.
We're out of here. Like, there's a lot of assumptions that you're dealing with like a good party.
Always, yeah.
More so than most, right? Like
I know, you sort of like forget the time that you were like the era that this is being run in. It's like everyone's just looking out for themselves. They just like assume people are innately good and want to be helpful. It's like, no, I want to just make the most money I can and stop doing this because I don't really want to die.
Well, the thing is too is like you wouldn't even have to sell Edmund to Lord Saxton. Like him as a political pawn is incredibly valuable. Like you could just like
sell him to the rival kingdom. Here's the natural heir to that kingdom.
Yeah.
All you have to do is dethrone him, and you can set your heir back in.
Yep.
With whatever demands you want, because you can just kill him otherwise.
Yep.
And then you have both kingdoms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying like there's a lot of that type of politicking that could occur, and I don't know that many players would necessarily want to be at the forefront of that thing, right? Like, because it's not dungeon delving, it's not D&Ding at that point, right? Like it's a different thing. So it really would depend on how much the DM wanted to be running that in the background more than anything else, right? Because I can't imagine your players are going to want to sit down for several hours and be like, all right, let's let's figure out the relatedness hierarchy and the political situation. Now, that being said, they might, but at that point, it's not D&D anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no dungeons and there's no dragons in that future scenario.
Cities and intrigue.
Well, it's sitting around like a conference table negotiating, right?
Yeah. I think that's probably all we got to say on this adventure. As always, guys, thanks for listening. If you have any comments or suggestions, you can email us at theimpandogre@gmail.com or hit us up on the Twitters at theimpandogre. Thanks.
Next week we are going to be doing The Sunless Citadel by Bruce Cordell.
That's right. Bye, guys.